Hi, I'm Dwayne Brown. Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, the fight over the Barrio Logan Community Plan is going to court. And it's all over the petition drive to stop the plan. A new lawsuit says opponents are breaking the law by telling lies.
And I'm Peggy Pico with results from a survey of San Diego County's Latino population, how demographics are changing along with attitudes and political leanings. Plus,
found out that I didn't have the right papers, that I was actually here in America illegally.
A Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and immigration activist shares his personal story in the film Documented, airing at the San Diego Asian Film Festival this weekend.
And our coverage of the San Diego mayor's race continues with a look at a split among San Diego progressives because of candidate Nathan Fletcher. KPBS Evening Edition starts now. Hi, good evening. Thanks for joining us. The controversial Barrio Logan Community Plan we've been telling you about seemed headed to the ballot box, but now it may be making a fatal pit stop in a courtroom. KPBS Metro reporter Sandia Dirks joins us with the latest on the City Council-backed plan. Sandia, bring us up to speed on where things stand.
Well, first there was the community plan. It was lauded by activists like the Environmental Health Coalition, or EHC. It was lauded as a win for the largely low-income Latino neighborhood. But after the city council passed the plan, the maritime industry was quick to say it would be a death blow to shipbuilding in San Diego. They started a referendum campaign, but signature gatherers were reportedly making misleading claims about the plan, even lying, and that could be illegal. The Elections Code states you have to provide voters with accurate information. So the EHC is suing the maritime industry to stop the city clerk from counting the signatures.
Now, what happens if the court finds the signature gatherers acted unlawfully?
Well, they will get a writ from the judge, and that will halt the city clerk from counting the signatures, and ultimately it will halt the referendum process. And remember, there aren't any do-overs. There are really strict timelines on these things. So if the referendum process gets stopped, that's it.
No do-overs. Now, has the maritime industry responded to the lawsuit?
Yes, they've sent out a press release. They say they've trained their signature collectors and they were armed with correct information. And Port of San Diego Ship Repair Association President Derry Pence, he called the lawsuit frivolous and claimed the EHC was out to kill the shipbuilding and repair industry.
KPBS Metro reporter Sandia Dirks. A new 5-year budget forecast is out for San Diego, and Mayor Todd Gloria says the city will be able to keep its current service levels, but there may not be enough money for everyone's wish list. The city faces a $19 million shortfall next year without additional spending. There will be surpluses, but council has already approved more spending on new fire stations, more police officers, and funding for the arts. Authorities are still investigating the deaths of 4 Camp Pendleton Marines. The 4 were killed yesterday while doing a routine sweep to make a range safe for future training exercises. The job is one of the most dangerous in the Marine Corps. Base officials have not released any more details about the accident. A fire shut down the Cabrillo Bridge into Balboa Park late this morning. It was started by a worker inside the bridge. It's getting retrofitted for earthquake safety. It took more than 4 hours to put the fire out, but the road is still closed tonight. Border Patrol is taking action about what it calls an alarming rate of agents getting arrested on alcohol-related charges. Our media partner 10 News obtained an internal memo. It says agents are being arrested at a rate of almost 2 a week. Next year, the agency plans to launch a new mandatory training program to stem the tide. Border Patrol says 9 San Diego agents have been arrested for drinking and driving this year. There are more than 2,600 in the sector. San Diego is considered a majority-minority county because no one ethnic group makes up more than 50% of our population. But the demographics are changing. Latinos are expected to make up 48% of the population by 2060. Peggy Pico has results of a scientific survey of the attitudes and experiences of this growing population.
KPBS and San Diego Magazine recently commissioned a survey to discover attitudes, ideologies, and political identity of the county's Latino residents. Here with the results is Tom Wong, assistant professor of political science at UC San Diego and author of the Hispanic Latino Survey. Welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
Tom, how was the survey conducted, and is it possible to discern attitudes of a large population in a survey like this?
Well, so this was a partnership between KPBS and San Diego Magazine. The survey was conducted over the course of a week in mid-September. We're talking about 400 respondents being called over the phone, interviews conducted in English and Spanish, and we have a margin of error of about 5%. So with any survey, we want to be cautious in the generalizations that we make. Because with 400 respondents and with over 1 million Hispanic Latinos in the county, we don't want to infer when we just have these sort of anomalous results.
What was the range of topics the survey participants were asked to answer?
Yeah, so we covered a lot of topics, but 3 themes in particular. So we're talking about intergroup relations, so how Hispanic Latinos in the community are interacting with other San Diegans. We also asked about political attitudes and preferences, and then the last set of questions related to community involvement.
Let's start with the Latino or Hispanic name.
Yeah.
First of all, what did you find there?
Okay, so it is a sort of mess in terms of defining Hispanic or Latino, and our census doesn't help with that very much. But what we found in the survey was a majority don't have a preference, but for those who do, people prefer Hispanic more than Latino.
So 58% with no preference whatsoever. Let's look at a few other questions and responses. What did you learn about country of origin as far as people living here in the county?
So in terms of country of origin, we're talking about Hispanic Latinos representing over 2 dozen countries in Central and South America, and as well as individuals with Spanish origin. And so in our survey, we found that the bulk of respondents were able to trace their ancestry back to Mexico. There was also a big group that was U.S. born, and then we have about 9 other countries represented.
So 73% trace their origins back to Mexico, but you also had a question in there following up on that about if you're called a Mexican.
Yeah, so one of the stereotypes about the Hispanic Latino community is that they are all Mexican. And that's just not the case, because we are talking about, again, dozens of countries in Central and South America where Hispanic Latinos are from. And so when we asked the question about stereotypes, we found that over half of respondents have been called Mexican despite individuals not knowing their backgrounds.
So 60% saying here's, but this leads to another disturbing finding in the survey, and it was about the question of have you ever been called illegal, regardless of your immigration status, and what did you find there?
Well, I think viewers will be surprised to know that over 2/3 of the Hispanic Latino population in San Diego County is actually U.S. born. So they're U.S. citizens, but we still have this image of the Hispanic Latino as being an immigrant. And the pejorative illegal immigrant is something that we found that over 1/4 of respondents actually experienced. And this is fascinating because a large number of those who are actually born in the U.S. have also experienced that negative stereotype of being called illegal.
Based on just their ethnicity.
Exactly.
A big question nationally and locally, of course, is about the political influence of this growing population after the presidential election in 2012. That came up quite a bit. What did you find out about San Diego Latinos compared to national when it comes up to the political arena?
So in terms of party identification, not that much unexpected. But in terms of the intersection between political identification and political ideology, we found that Democrats are actually more conservative here.
The 40% of the Democrats that identified it actually are more conservative than national Democrats?
Yes.
I see.
Yes. And so here we're talking about not just Democrats that are a bit more conservative, but we're also talking about some interesting trends with those that identified as independent. So nationally, independents tend to be more conservative, but here the Hispanic Latino independents tend to be a bit more liberal.
And I understand they were more willing in the Latino population than the general population to cross over party line during vote?
Yes, so there are two questions that are relevant here. So one, we asked whether or not a person would vote for a Hispanic Latino candidate if they disagreed on the issues. And overwhelmingly, the answer was no. But then we asked the question of whether or not a respondent would vote across party lines.
Okay. I know. Go ahead and answer that. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Okay.
I had one more question for you.
No problem. And there we see that Democrats are more likely to cross party lines. And so those two things, we have Democrats that are more conservative and more willing to cross party lines, means they're fair game for Republicans.
Okay, well, I'm going to have to send folks to our website, kppbs.org, to read the entire survey, especially the very important question about immigration and immigration reform. Political science professor Tom Wong, thank you.
Thank you.
San Diego's special election is Tuesday, and there seems to be a crack among San Diego's progressives because of Nathan Fletcher's run for mayor. Of course, you recall he became a Democrat earlier this year, but party stalwarts say he's a bad bet for mayor because of his newbie status and a thin pro-union record in the state legislature. But others say Fletcher has powerful promise, both in his electability and his capacity to build consensus. KPBS investigative reporter Amitha Sharma has the story.
Tenacious and passionate are words Mickey Kasparian uses to describe Lorena Gonzalez. Kasparian is president of the San Diego Imperial County's Labor Council. He hired her to be the Labor Council's political director, a post she held before she successfully ran for state assembly this spring.
What she accomplished more than any other thing was holding candidates accountable for their votes. Lorena thought if we were ever going to be able to build capacity for the labor movement, if we were ever able to become a political power, we were going to have to hold candidates accountable, in particular Democratic candidates. If they made one poor vote, she would hold them accountable, and we haven't endorsed candidates who have given us one bad vote.
That's why Kasparian says Gonzalez urged Labor not to endorse Democrats Todd Gloria and Sherry Leitner in their re-election bids to the city council last year. She argued Gloria's 60% and Leitner's 54% voting records for workers fell short of what Labor should expect of those it supports, according to Kasparian. When Nathan Fletcher ran for mayor last year, first as a Republican, then an independent, he came out against project labor agreements and argued in favor of pension reform and managed competition. So why in this month's special mayoral election to replace Bob Filner is Gonzalez propping up Fletcher, who voted with Labor just 18% of the time during his two state assembly terms? Even Republican candidate Kevin Faulkner received a higher rating at 31% than Fletcher. Kasparian says he's flummoxed most by why Gonzalez didn't instead get behind Democratic mayoral candidate and Councilman David Alvarez, who voted with Labor 81%.
I cannot give you any business reason in the world why she would endorse Nathan Fletcher. Now, I know she's always liked Nathan, even when he was a Republican and he was in the Assembly. I mean, she's always talked highly of him. But it is totally against the standards that she built in San Diego.
Gonzalez declined comment for this piece, but in an interview with iNewsSource last month, she conceded Fletcher has not always been so good on worker issues.
He's never going to be me. He's never going to be a former labor leader, nor should he be. But he's going to be good on the issues that matter to working folks, and I think that that's good for the entire city.
Gonzalez also pointed out that Alvarez didn't get labor support when he ran for the city council in 2010. She said Alvarez was no lover of labor and that he had called unions a special interest. And she paints a different picture than Kasparian on why she champions certain candidates for office.
There's more than just having the progressive values. It's about getting things done. It's about the ability to get elected and then to bring people together to actually achieve goals. I saw in him somebody who wasn't going to go away, somebody who was going to be a rising star. He had the right charisma and personality and background, and he was went to war and has done incredible things.
Sorry we're late.
Some of the city's other unions agree with Gonzalez. Unions for firefighters, police officers, and the city's workers have all endorsed Fletcher. Municipal Employees Association General Manager Michael Zuquette says his union liked Fletcher last year when he ran for mayor as an independent, but went with Bob Filner, who opposed pension reform, unlike Fletcher. Political pragmatism, he says, drove the MEA to back Fletcher this year.
We were in a position where we were going to have a very short election cycle. We just thought Nathan was going to hit the ground running, be a very strong candidate.
The choice between putting faith in Fletcher's current campaign promises or relying on his record as a Republican assemblyman has also divided local Democrats. The San Diego County Democratic Party endorsed Alvarez against the recommendations of not just Gonzalez, but Congressman Juan Vargas and Scott Peters, who also lobbied for Fletcher.
We really don't know. We really don't know Nathan, so there was no way we could endorse him.
The party's Central Committee member Lori Kern says there have been a lot of hurt feelings, mostly centered around Lorena Gonzalez.
It's been kind of ugly that way. I think there's been a little bit of a split in the Democratic Party, and definitely with labor. Lorena, was such a champion for labor, and now it's like she forgot about us.
Amita Sharma, KPBS News.
Of course, you can find all of our election coverage online at kpbs.org/election. A Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and immigration activist tells Peggy Pico about his new documentary airing at San Diego's Asian Film Festival this weekend.
Jose Antonio Vargas discovered he was undocumented when he applied for his driver's license at age 16. Vargas went on to become a successful journalist at the Washington Post, San Francisco Chronicle, Philadelphia Daily, and Huffington Post. In 2011, he revealed his immigration status in an essay in New York Times Magazine. Tonight, he joins us to talk about his new film, Documented, featured at the 14th Annual San Diego Asian Film Festival. Jose Antonio Vargas, welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me.
You were born in the Philippines, and I know you still have family there.
Oh, yeah.
In light of this typhoon, how is everybody doing?
Well, thankfully, my mother, my sister, and my brother are all kind of in the northern part in Manila, so it's not as affected. They lost electricity for a few hours, and my mother said that the roof was clanging off. But thankfully, everybody's fine. But, it's just heartbreaking, looking at all the photos and the videos.
I can imagine, but I'm glad they're okay.
Yeah, no, they're fine.
Now, I know you haven't seen your mother or been back to the Philippines since the age of 12 when you came to the U.S. to live with your grandparents.
Yeah.
But your mother is a central focus in this film, so let's take a look.
Yeah.
So when I found out that I didn't have the right papers, that I was actually here in America illegally, I had to create a different system of reality in my head in which she was never a factor. We haven't seen each other in almost 20 years.
Almost 20 years. This clearly is a very personal film.
That wasn't the original plan.
Right, exactly. So tell us about that. How'd this come about?
Well, I was gonna do, I'm kind of a big cinephile, so I've studied documentaries, and I was gonna do like a much more Dream Act meets Michael Moore kind of a film, right?
Political.
Yes, I had crashed the Mitt Romney rally in Iowa in 2011.
And you were asked to leave?
And I was escorted out by the cops and asked to leave, but not deported, which was interesting in and of itself. But yeah, so I was going to do that. But then one of my filmmaker friends said, how can you possibly do a film on immigration and not put your mom? And, how do I do that? I can't leave the country. If I leave, I won't be able to come back.
Right, you don't have a passport.
So deciding to send a film crew to the Philippines and then having the footage come back and then, watching footage of this woman that I hadn't seen since I was 12, it was just, surreal.
Has that changed your relationship with your mother? Because you've had to edit this woman you're getting to know again.
In some ways it's been really cathartic, I'm a writer, right, for the most part. This is my second documentary, but film is very literal, It's a very kind of like you put a camera in front of somebody, it is what it is. And I think about how many other people are out there, right, who can't see their mom or their dad, who can't see family for years, for decades. And when we argue about immigration reform, I think that's what we should kind of keep in mind.
How come you made this documentary? I know you said originally it wasn't to reconnect with your mother, but
No, that wasn't the original.
Why do you want it to air right now? What's the purpose?
I mean, I should
behind
say,
it?
by the way, you know, this is kind of the golden age of documentary filmmaking. You know, the technology is just so much more, you know, available to people, and so a lot of films are getting made, right, by the very people who are experiencing whatever that issue is. And so I knew that I wanted to do a film, and I started filming before I even came out. So
Before you, let's talk about that. Now, Documented actually does chronicle your coming out process, so to speak. What has happened since you've gone public with your immigration status?
Well, I mean, a part of me expected to be deported, and what I was not, like a few months after publicly disclosing, you know, my status, I actually called the editor of Time magazine, and I'm like, hey, you know, I want to write a story about why I haven't gotten deported. So one of the scenes in the film is actually me calling the government, you know, Immigration Customs Enforcement, which was called ICE, you know, INS before. And, hi, I haven't heard from you. Are you going to deport me? Why not? You know.
What'd they say?
Well, the woman on the line was like, what are you doing?
Yeah, why are you
like, "What are you
self-reporting
doing?"
yourself?
You know? But, you know, Obama, as we know, President Obama has deported nearly 2 million people in 5 years. Right, more than any other president, and I'm not one of them. And so I, you know, as a reporter, my job was to figure out why not, you know.
Well, we have to watch the film to get that
Yes,
answer. All right.
exactly.
You're an immigration activist now, and some would say the public face of undocumented immigrants. What do you think needs to change regarding immigration laws in this country?
Well, I mean, I should say that I'm the most privileged undocumented person in this country. You know, while people are getting deported every day, scared for their lives, driving down 101 or like getting a job here in San Diego, like I'm here talking to you about my film. And I think what needs to change is we need to have a more honest conversation about this issue. You know, like here in San Diego, there's so much talk about the border, right? I mean, I came here, you know, on a plane. I didn't cross a border.
Right. So broadening that up. Unfortunately, people will have to see your film for that because I am out of time. So Jose Antonio Vargas, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for
having
me.
And I do want to let people know that Documented screens this Friday night at 7 and 9:20 at the San Diego Asian Film Festival. For more information, go to kpbs.org.
I'm Judy Woodruff. On the next news hour, the first TV interview with the new head of the Federal Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. That's Thursday on the PBS NewsHour.
May not look like it, but San Diego may get a trace of rain this weekend, but we are still facing one of the driest years on record. KPBS reporter Susan Murphy tells us what it means for our vital water supply.
Just 3.6 inches of rain have fallen in San Diego since January 1st. It's one of the smallest amounts of precipitation to date since record-keeping began more than 150 years ago. November is usually the start of the region's rainy season, but a stubborn ridge of high pressure has pushed any potential storms away. Dana Freehoff is Principal Water Resource Specialist with the San Diego County Water Authority. She says despite the dry weather, there are no mandatory water restrictions planned.
Because we've made investments in Southern California in storage, and the Water Authority's made investments in our Colorado River transfers, and also demands are down, so we don't anticipate having shortages in 2014.
Water officials have tapped into reserves this year to meet demand. Freehoff says Southern California's largest reservoir, Diamonds Valley Lake in Hemet, is at a healthy 73% capacity, but many of Northern California's reserves are far below where they should be.
One of the key issues here is that we have been relying on storage, and if we are not able to eventually replenish those storage levels, then we could be in more serious conditions. If we don't, eventually we need a wet year in order to fill those or replenish those reservoirs.
Freehoff urges residents and businesses to use water wisely and keep demand low and storage high. Susan Murphy, KPBS News.
Well, things will be a bit cooler over the weekend. Cloudy along the coast. Temperatures mostly in the low 60s with a very slight chance of some sprinkles. Inland valleys will be overcast as well in the 60s. Much cooler in the mountains. Temperatures in the 50s. Windy with some rain expected. And in the desert, a mix of sun and clouds with temperatures in the 70s and 80s. Next week will be the 50th anniversary of the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. Months before his death, Kennedy delivered the commencement address at San Diego State. In tonight's About San Diego, Ken Kramer gives us a look at a special place Kennedy visited.
Surrounded by gates and guards, it is a beautiful San Diego residence that holds an historic distinction.
In a house most San Diegans don't even know exists is a room that's never seen by the general public, made famous by one man who came here one time.
Inside the house, here is that room. And why is it so famous, so important? Well, you have to go back to 1963. It was the 6th of June, and President John F. Kennedy had come to San Diego. 250,000 people lined El Cajon Boulevard to see his motorcade to San Diego State, where a commencement day crowd of 30,000 people gathered in Aztec Bowl and saw him get an honorary degree.
To be an instant graduate of this distinguished college is greatly appreciated.
Then it was off by helicopter to the Marine Corps Recruit Depot, where the president saw recruits in training and met with some of them. And then he came to this home on the grounds of the depot where the commanding general lives. A room was prepared for him. He could take a short nap if he wished before he had to leave San Diego. There was a bathroom and a shower. It was a place to take a little break. And to this day, there's a plaque that dedicates the room to John F. Kennedy, who rested here during his trip to MCRD in 1963. We couldn't know then, of course, that he'd never return, that in less than 6 months he'd be gone. But for one day at least, he was here, and that's a fact worth preserving about San Diego.
You can see more of Ken's stories about San Diego tonight and every Thursday night at 8 here on KPBS. Tonight's stories are online as well at kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.